And welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll take phone calls in this segment, 888-589-8840, if you want to comment on the presidential campaign. And I still didn't finish up talking about what these left-leaning polls are doing. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk. And what Debbie's suggesting, I think she's right about this, what these left-leaning polls are trying to do is they're trying to skew the results so it looks like a dead heat. They know it's not. They know the energy is with Mitt Romney. If they were doing fair polling, they would show a significant gap for Mitt Romney. But they want to create the impression that this thing is a dead heat so that if President Obama wins re-election, they can say, well, that's what we told you. That's what we said. And if he loses, then they can accuse the Republicans of having stolen the election. They can say, look, this thing was a dead heat. How do you explain this margin of victory for Mitt Romney? The Republicans have stolen this election. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Ohio. That's what I'm going to be watching tomorrow, along with a lot of you, because it could come down to Ohio's 18 electoral votes, and they're going to have a huge issue over the counting of these provisional ballots. We talked with Ken Blackwell, former Secretary of State from the state of Ohio, last Thursday. They're going to have maybe 200,000, 300,000 provisional ballots that are going to have to be sorted through by hand and counted by hand. They can't even start doing that for 10 days. Now, the Democrats will tie that thing up in knots. What they did in Washington several years ago, the last time they had a gubernatorial race in Washington State, the Republican Rossi won, but the Democrats, with one legal challenge and lawsuit after another, engineered 3 different recounts, and finally Christine Gregoire won on the 3rd recount. Al Franken did the same thing in Minnesota, took that seat away from Norm Coleman. So you're going to have the Democrats lawyered up. They will tie that process up in absolute knots if Ohio turns out to be the decisive state, and it very well could be. We may not know who the president is until we know who wins Ohio. 18 electoral votes there, and that could be an interesting proposition because it could be Thanksgiving before we know who won Ohio. If the Democrats gum that thing up with legal challenges, it could be Christmas before we know who won Ohio. We could be looking at another Florida situation. Here's that story I was telling you about. This is a story actually from Saturday, talking about what happened Friday in Ohio last night. And this is from Breitbart.com. Last night in the cold and with long lines, 30,000 people showed up in Ohio to see Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. That same day, Obama attracted a meager 2,800. And then in 2008, at his last stop in Cleveland, a Democrat stronghold, Obama attracted 80,000 people. This morning, at his last 2012 stop in the same city, Obama could only attract 4,000. That means he's off 95%. You can't tell me that's a significant drop in voter enthusiasm. Media doing their part. There was a campaign event yesterday, I think in Milwaukee. And the media is reporting that with Katy Perry there to do some music and stuff, that 20,000 people showed up for this campaign event. Well, the only problem is it was in an arena that only holds 12,580 people. It's impossible for there to have been 20,000 people there, but that did not stop the media, the local newspaper in Milwaukee, and the Hollywood Reporter from reporting the 20,000 figure. Here's a story from Breitbart.com about people actually walking out of a Barack Obama campaign event during Obama's speech, after Clinton had spoke. So they were there. They wanted to hear Clinton. Clinton speaks. They're dialed in. They're focused. Then President Obama gets up and people start walking out. A steady stream of cold people trotting towards the exit in the middle of Obama's speech. The enthusiasm is gone. Now, here's an example of what I'm talking about where I just think there's something hinky about these polls. This is CNSnews.com. An NBC Wall Street Journal Marist poll of likely Ohio voters, which was published on November 3rd, that's 2 days ago. Listen to this. Shows that 45% of the people they polled say they are conservative. 23% say they are liberal. And yet Barack Obama in this poll is killing Mitt Romney by 6 points, 51 to 45. Does that make any sense to you at all? That makes absolutely no sense to me. 45% of the people that are polled say they're conservative. 2 to 1, 23% say they're liberal, and yet somehow Barack Obama is leading in that poll 51-45. I don't get it. In fact, I don't believe it. Now, President Obama had his final rally in Wisconsin today with Bruce Springsteen, and he drew fewer people than John Kerry drew with Bruce Springsteen back in 2004. The White House put the crowd at 18,000 for Obama and the boss in Madison, Wisconsin. That was this morning. Far less than the 80,000 the defeated Democratic nominee drew 8 years ago just before the election. John Kerry, Bruce Springsteen, Madison, Wisconsin, 2004, 80,000 people. Barack Obama, Bruce Springsteen, Madison, Wisconsin, 2012, 18,000, off by a factor of 4. You got another interesting indicator to me. You have Democrat Senate candidates in fairly conservative states. They're trying to get as far away from Barack Obama as they can. You've got in Montana, John Tester; in Missouri, Claire McCaskill; in North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp; in Nebraska, Bob Kerrey; Indiana, Joe Donnelly. They're not saying a word about Obama. They don't want Obama showing up to campaign for them. They don't want to even be associated with or seen in the same zip code with Barack Obama. That's not a sign of building energy. And this is a concern. We've talked about the military vote before, but here's a deep concern to me. Here's a story from the Military Times saying that military ballots from Afghanistan had been put in the mail September 27. At the Bagram Airfield Army Post, they were express mail. They have tracking numbers for this express mail. They put the ballots in an orange ballot box and in a dedicated mail bag. And it hadn't showed up. Mailed September 27, still hadn't showed up. So they tracked it down, and they found that the ballots are still sitting in Bahrain, in the country of Bahrain, and they've been sitting there since September 30th, may or may not get here in time to count. Now, the RNC is saying that in key swing states, there are more Republicans than Democrats who have not voted. This goes back to the Major Garrett story we talked about earlier. There's high-propensity voters. These are the ones that are almost sure to vote. And the theory is, and I think it's a good one, that the Democrats, the only people they could get to the polls early are the high-propensity voters. The low-propensity voters don't care. They've checked out. There's no enthusiasm. They're unlikely to vote maybe really at all. So the high-propensity voters for the Democrats have already voted. But according to this story, National Review, in Colorado, there are 26,000 more high-propensity Republican voters available than Democrat voters. In Florida, 166,000 more. In Iowa, 85,000 more. And in Nevada, 16,000 more. In Ohio, 368,000 more high-propensity voters available than the Democrats have in all of those are key swing states. And early absentee voting in Chicago is down 57%. This is the heart of the Democratic Party. This is Obama country. And early voting and absentee voting combined down 57% from the levels in 2008. Well, let's grab a couple of phone calls before we get to the bottom of the hour. Let's go to Paul, Wilmington, North Carolina. Paul, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. I had sent a message on Facebook to you as about a gentleman who posted on Facebook that he voted 5 times last week, said he would do anything to keep Mitt Romney out of the White House for the future of his grandchildren. And,
so he was bragging on Facebook that he actually managed to vote 5 times.
Yes, and this was, I know this is, I forwarded it myself to the NC Election Board, and I called them this morning, and, of course, I got a recording. They give you 3 options, and the last option at the end of that recording, before you leave a voicemail, he said, if this is concerning, and he gave the gentleman's name, don't bother leaving a message. We're looking into this matter. Okay,
so you weren't the only one to flag him for that.
Oh no! It was apparently, and this was very early, so apparently they had a bunch of messages left over the weekend of people who were just outraged.
Well, it's good to know that they are on that, and and we've talked about these stories about Democrats attempting voter fraud, loading up Somalis in vans in Ohio, carting them to the polls. These Somalis don't even speak English, and the Democrats are coaching them on how to vote. We got another story over the weekend about Democrats loading up mentally disabled people in vans, taking them to the polling places and voting for them. So there's no question they're going to have to be watched like a hawk. Well, listen, Paul, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Let's go to George in Jefferson County, Missouri. George, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Brian?
Good.
Hey, I was just wondering, if Obama, the one guy was saying, your caller before, that if Obama was going to, if he was going to let go people from Guantanamo Bay, if he would do stuff like that, what kind of checks and balances are there that if he got really crazy and started doing really stupid stuff, and I don't want to elaborate because
don't want to give him any ideas. In other words,
balances that he somebody would be able to stop this guy.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate the call, George. Thank you for that. And the reality is, the only check and balance on President Obama, if he gets reelected, is the power of impeachment. Because what he has seen is he's issued 79 executive orders, and he's gotten away with it. A lot of these executive orders flout the law, flout the Constitution. His EPA has gotten away with regulations that are absolutely killing the coal industry. Nobody's stopping them. Nobody's checking them. He has, according to Heritage Foundation, 40 times simply ignored the law, the Constitution, and Congress. All of those, every one of those represents an impeachable offense. But what Barack Obama has seen is he can get away with it. The Republicans aren't doing anything to stop it. They're wringing their hands and they're complaining and they're moaning, but they're not doing anything. The only thing that the Republicans can do would be to file articles of impeachment. Now, they're not going to win the trial because the Senate conducts the trial. It's dominated by Democrats, so they're not going to win, but at least it's the one thing that the House can do. It's up to them to file the articles of impeachment, essentially the indictment of a sitting president. But that really is the only power they have. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, this election tomorrow is so important. The only, right now, I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, the only entity that can stop Barack Obama is the American people. Republicans in Congress can't do it, or they won't do it, but the American people can stop Barack Obama. November 6th, tomorrow, can be Impeachment Day USA. The American people can impeach him, they can try him, they can convict him, and remove him from office all in one day. Focal Point AFR Talk.